Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are happy to have you to listen to an expert about building your brand and digital presence. I am Citlali Rios and I will be your chat monitor today. I'm just going through the rules for tonight. Remember to mute your microphone and keep it muted all throughout the session. And make sure it is always muted to minimize background noise. We will have sessions for Q&A throughout our sessions. Maurizio will give us some time in every section to address your questions. You just put them in the chat and I will read them out loud when it's time. I will also be monitoring the chat for any other comments or concerns or troubleshooting during the session. We remind you to have a respectful conduct to both presenters and participants and ensure the discussions stay relevant to the topic and avoid inappropriate behavior of our language. And a reminder, we are recording the session and any resource shared today will be shared via email on our LinkedIn group later on. Today we have Maurizio Gioffrè, and just if you haven't connected with him, this is a good opportunity to follow him on LinkedIn. He is the head of sales and talent solutions for a recruitment agency specialized in Salesforce. Maurizio has been in the tech recruitment space since 2016. Having international recruitment experience across various labor markets, he has seen and helped many transition from one country to another. While he doesn't deny this is a challenge for most, he also believes that you can create a softer landing for yourself with the right networking approach. And we just have a slight update on this slide. Maurizio looks forward to connecting with you. Today, we're talking about building your brand and digital presence. We just had a different topic here, but it is what we are focusing on mostly on LinkedIn. And without further ado, the floor is yours, Mauricio. Thanks so much.
Okay, gracias. Appreciate it. And excited to do this session for all of you. To put things in perspective from the get-go, the building a digital presence, I'm not necessarily an official advocate, for example, of LinkedIn, but that's the predominant focus of today, because from a professional perspective, that's probably going to be your best bet of where you want to perhaps start building your digital presence. Now, a thing to remember is that just simply because you have a great brand on LinkedIn doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have a better opportunity than anyone else in finding a job or landing business or whatever reason it is that we're going to talk about. The key thing is that it just could simply increase those chances, right? You don't have to be connected with every single person in the world. You don't have to have every single person on LinkedIn know who you are. It's just depending on what you're looking for, there's ways to break that down so that the right people may be more interested in connecting with you should you do this correctly, right? Now, there's tons that we can talk about in subsequent sessions on how to create different types of video content, written content, all this stuff that you would create and put online for people to view and like and share and whatnot. But if you don't set up your profile correctly, a lot of that may not land how you want it to land. And if it does get viewed by others on LinkedIn when you're trying to build that brand, they may not see what you want them to see when they actually land on your LinkedIn page. So we're going to do a few things today. Number one, the first thing that we're going to go over is I'm going to show you LinkedIn Recruiter. So LinkedIn Recruiter is a premium version of LinkedIn that most staffing agencies and internal recruitment teams use. So you can see how they sift through various candidates when they're looking to fill different jobs. Okay. We're going to go through a couple of different ways on how your profile is viewed in small and big form, so that if someone's looking at it in their mobile, you can see what they see, or you can start to consider what they see. And that's going to tie into how we create our profile. There's nothing special about my profile per se. It's the only one that I can log in and change actively in a session like this. So we have to use mine for this session when we're going through each of the different parts of the profile, why they're important, what they can do, and all that good stuff. And then finally, we'll look at a job, like a job on LinkedIn that you might apply for, and you can contrast that and how well it relates to your profile and how you might be able to adapt your profile should you actually want to apply for that job, right? But in summary, the whole point of doing this, right, whether you're looking to win business through LinkedIn or get a job, right? You're looking to increase your chances of getting a job. The whole point of doing this is to, without someone ever speaking to you, knowing who you are, what you do, perhaps not even caring, right? They look at your profile and they might think, I'm actually interested in potentially connecting with this person, right? Before they've ever met you, that you've built the smallest ounce of trust that makes the next step in actually connecting with them a little bit easier than if you didn't do this, right? So what you can see here, does anyone have any initial questions on what we're presenting today based off of what I said, actually, before we move on? It looks like not. Perfect. So this, what you can see is LinkedIn Recruiter's search function for people who work in staff agencies or internal recruitment teams. Okay. Now, all of these fields correspond to something that you can edit and change on your own profile. Okay. So everything from job title, which is pretty obvious, right, to projects, for example, which most of you may not have even realized that it was a part of your profile that you could edit. Okay. But all of them are very important when it comes to tailoring your LinkedIn profile for who you want, right? And that's actually the first thing that you want to consider when you're going through all of these, right? Is when you look at what you're doing this for. I mean, if it's just simply to be famous, I can't help you with that, right? Because I can't promise that's going to work, and I have no idea, to be honest, how people go viral, right? This is more to look at, like, if you're trying to win business, okay, what does the person I sell to care about, and what would they want to see in me, right? If you're a salesperson, are they going to be more interested in the value that you have to bring to them in whatever it is you might sell? Or do they want to see that you're just like an all-star sales influencer that has a lot of sales tips for people who do the same job as you, right? Are you trying to sell sales training, or are you trying to sell whatever it is you sell to your prospect? So you got to think about like what the person on the other side and who you're trying to evoke interest in or evoke interest from is interested in. If you're looking to get a job, right? Think about the people who've either managed you before, if you're trying to get the same job or you're in the same line of work that you've been in. And if not, think about the type of job that you want, who that person would report to, and what that person, that manager, would care about, right? And that's kind of what we have to translate into your profile best we can to evoke the most interest when they perhaps click on your profile. So job titles, something that will most staffing people will do is they'll start with something general. So let's say it was an architect, right? There's so many different ways you can, like you can see here, like all the different names for an architect, but simply by putting architect, there's a whole ton of titles, like 26 titles that get associated to that. So what this means is that if I were to search for someone using this specific name, it would also include people who have these titles in their current job, right? Current job or past job, depending on what I decide to select as an example, okay? That's the title, right? You can play with that best you want. You can you don't want to deviate it too far from what your core job is. So if you're an architect by trade and you change it to, like, I don't know, chief magic maker or something like that, just because you have a cool title, it may not pull the right interest from people that you want to actually see your profile. So it might be self-explanatory. Keep that in mind. With locations, this is something that can be as granular as Mississauga, Ontario, and if I'm not mistaken, as wide as a continent. So I can say North America, right? On your profile, you'll be able to see that you can actually input your area code or your postal code. That's something that could be a good idea if you're looking for local opportunities, but it all depends on how much you're willing to share. But this is something that's pretty self-explanatory in what they're going to look at. Skills and assessments, these are just like the simple skills that we'll show you where you put those in your profile, but this is very self-explanatory on the ones that you choose, but it is something you may want to consider changing as you go, depending on what jobs you're applying for or what what's even better is what job applications you have outstanding on LinkedIn, right? If you change these for every job you apply for, it's not going to be valuable. But if you're applying for the same types of roles that have the same types of skills, you might want to let that sit for a little bit until you start to get some responses from those applications before you start changing these skills and apply for other jobs that maybe match a little bit better. Companies is a big one because sometimes people will put the company name, but it doesn't actually connect to the company page. I'll try and show you what I mean by that later. But if you don't do that, and I'm looking for people, for example, who come from any of these companies, or I don't know, the company that I work at now, Montreal Associates, if I wanted to find those people, if your profile wasn't directly connected to that company, you may not necessarily show up when I'm running a search for people who work there. And that happens very often, by the way, especially if someone who's looking for your type of profile is staffing for a competitor, super common where we may just throw up a list of competitors where we know we can find exactly the people that we need. And just based off of that, those are people who may get reached out to or selected for an interview if there's an application process. Yeah, easy as that. With keywords, this is going to pull from the descriptions that you write, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But this comes directly from what you would input without there being any fixed field or fixed name coming from LinkedIn. You effectively can write anything in certain fields in your profile, and this is where if we type something very specific, like a technology or a type of project or a skill set, it could come up anywhere in your profile. Current companies is just another field they have to hone in on where someone works today, as opposed to companies here where it could have been somewhere you work today or somewhere you worked before, or someone or people who work at that specific company now and before. There's different ways you can set the parameters, as you can see. This is just a way to look at people who work at a specific company now. Seniority, this all goes by years of experience. I can't recall exactly who gets bucketed or how they bucket seniority, but it's based off of, again, how long your career is based off of LinkedIn and what role you have, right? And depending on what we're looking for, depending on what someone is looking for, obviously they may hone in on exactly this. So again, if you put the wrong title because you want something that sounds really cool but doesn't exactly mirror your role or the type of role you want, could it disqualify you from someone who's looking? Could, not impossible, right? So just something to think about. Now, this is where it goes a little bit deeper. These are advanced filters, right? So spoken languages. To what language do you speak and to what level do you speak it at, right? This is something that could be very important depending on the company that we're looking at, depending on where the customers are. This is something that, especially if you speak French, speak Spanish, right? We see some stuff for Japanese or Mandarin, for example. Like these are all really good things at whatever level you speak it at. You may want to include that in your profile because that alone sometimes, depending on the position, is enough to get a conversation going if they see this on your profile directly. Okay. If you're Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Another thing, just because we're on languages, is profile languages. We'll show you how to do this in one of the other sections of this session, but you can create a profile that, depending on the spoken language or the preferred language of the person who's searching for you, if they prefer to have their LinkedIn and computer in Spanish and they log on, it'll automatically show your profile in Spanish with the option for them to click on English so they can see it in both. So it takes a bit more time because effectively you have to create the same content on one profile again into another language. But if you're that fluent, it does make sense to do that, because if you want an opportunity where you can leverage that language, this is a way to showcase that, okay, this person really is fluent in both. They have a profile in both languages. Super valuable when looking for people who are trilingual and all that kind of good stuff. Network relationships is something that, as you grow your network and you connect with more people, right? That's something that we sometimes look at. If the person's like a first level connection of mine, are we already connected? So I have an easy way to directly message you, right? Or if it's a second degree connection, are you a person who I might be more easily able to get a referral to? So that's one reason to grow your network, not aimlessly where you just connect with anybody necessarily, but within your space. It is a good idea because this is a way where we can sift through that. Recently joined LinkedIn. It's not something that I use too much, but it's pretty self-explanatory. If you've joined LinkedIn recently, you could pop up separately in the search. Industries are a pretty big deal. So if there's a way where you can list the industry that you're in, oftentimes we look for people who come from a specific industry, who have worked at companies within a specific industry, especially now. That's a lot of companies want people who understand their business, whatever department that you work in. That's a really valuable one to make sure that you have down. Schools in my specific job is a little bit less important as far as what we look for, but nonetheless, in a lot of jobs, it's very possible they could be looking for certain people who come from different schools. Just like companies, make sure you choose the actual school that you were at, and you don't just spell it out and it doesn't connect to the actual school's page. It may not come up if you do that. Years of experience, pretty self-explanatory. Years in current company, also self-explanatory. This just is important because you want to make sure you get the dates right. There are some people who don't do this, and it looks like they were working at a given company for a lot longer or a lot shorter than they really were, and that just sets the conversation off to a bad start, or it means you don't get a conversation at all. So you want to make sure that you are accurate with your dates of when you were working somewhere. Make sure they match your resume. Employment type, especially for those of you who are interested in one or the other. If you're a contractor and you're looking for contracts, 100% of the time, if there's a net new search where whoever's looking for this type of person wants to find a contractor, they are looking at people who are open to work as contractors first, right? These people, part-time, full-time, won't even get a first look if there's enough people here. So you want to, again, don't just click everything because you're open to anything. Really think about what you want and hone in on what's important to you. If you're looking for full time, put full time, right? If you want an internship, take an internship. If you're a contractor, same with part time, depending on what you want, right? Make sure that's accurate, right? Because that will pull up when it shows if you're open to work or not, what kind of employment you're open to. That's where it's a way to weed people out. You want to make sure it's accurate so that the right opportunities come to you. And again, that's something that you can input into your profile, even in your current roles. I'll show you that in a second. Workplace types. If this is a deal breaker for you, don't just select everything. Again, choose what makes the most sense to what you want. Very self-explanatory, right? If there's someone who only wants remote and this role is hybrid, we're obviously going to go to the people who have on-site or hybrid first, right? If the person only has on-site and it's remote, we're not going to be looking at people who want only on-site, right? So don't select everything. Select what makes sense for you. This one is more obviously dedicated to the US. I'm not sure if we have anyone from the States here, but there are a lot of programs in the States where they specifically try and hire military veterans. I don't know why they don't have one in Canada, unfortunately, but for right now, this is just an American thing. This more has to do with the companies that you put into your profile. Again, just making sure that you're choosing the right company will make sure that the most accurate information is pulled when you're being looked for. And this ultimately has to do with the staffing company or the internal recruitment team's activity against a specific person. So have they been messaged before? Has there been any interaction? Have they responded to messages, for example, previously? Have they always declined? That's where that kind of comes in. And projects. Projects is a section where you can actually get a little bit granular on what you've done in any given position. I will show you an example of this in a minute. It's a good way to really better define all of your experience in bite-sized chunks where we may be looking for a specific type of project, whether if it's in IT, for example, a type of implementation with a given system. Usually those names are pretty consistent. It's pretty easy to search for a project and have someone pull up if they've actually worked on that. I know that was a lot to digest, but is there any initial questions about how these searches typically work? If yes, please.
Thank you. We have a question, and this might be more relevant maybe down the line, but I will
Mhm.
ask it now
Cool.
because I
Yep.
think you can really approach this from the recruitment's perspective. So the question
Okay.
is, what is the probability that a recruiter will do a proactive search for candidates? This is because it seems that the positions posted are focused on candidates applying, and then recruiters filter according to the resumes already received.
You mean so they don't have an active job, but they're proactively sourcing for a
No,
job
I
that
mean,
may or may not come?
no, I think the question is regarding what's the chances that a recruiter like you will go finding a candidate instead of just looking at the pool that already applied?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. It depends it depends on the agency. It depends on the team. So for us, for example, at our agency, we actually try to never do this, to be honest. right? We try and call people who've done work for us before. At our company, it's mainly contract IT staffing, right? So these are people who they work a project for us, we get good references, and we want to keep working with that person, right? If that person refers us to someone else, that person who was referred immediately goes into like a separate bucket of people who are referred to us because they've been referred by someone we know does good work. So immediately, like we try to never do this because we want people we know that we can trust already, right? That's a boutique niche focused agency, right? That would take more of that approach, right? If you go to an agency that's probably a little bit larger, where they have a massive volume of positions that aren't necessarily as niche, right? It's very possible you're going to see them put out a lot of, they're going to put out a lot of, how do you say, like job
Posts.
advertisements. Yes,
Yeah,
job
yeah.
posts, job advertisement. They'll put a high volume of that. They'll probably do a lot of this type of sourcing either in addition, or they may just see who comes through the job post and take whoever comes through and only resort to this if they don't get someone there. Usually, uh, if they're posting a high volume of jobs, they may not have time to do this type of sourcing for everybody, right? But the idea, right, is if someone in our type of job is smart about what they're doing and they understand where the pipeline of jobs is going to be coming from, they want to speak to people sooner rather than later, because by the time the requirement is given to us, and this is whether it's internal or external, I'm an external staffing guy, right? Internal work at the company that actually has the roles. As soon as the requirement comes through from the line of business, the hiring manager, it's oftentimes like you're behind the ball already. It's too late, right? So most staffing people, internal or external, have some kind of specialty to a degree. It could be a very specific niche. It could be a little bit wider. Most of those people will be open to having a conversation with someone who is in their space proactively, right? Anytime you're speaking to someone about a role that's open now, you're immediately in a position where there's a lot of competition. Unless you know that person already and they've gotten you work before and they're telling you that you're the only person we're going to represent for this opportunity, right? You're probably up against quite a bit of people. And that's why you see these job postings with like hundreds of applicants, right? It's kind of hard to get through the noise. You don't really know anybody, right? I'm not saying that's a bad way to get a job. I'm not saying that's a bad way to find someone. It is what it is. When there's more people, there's more competition. It's harder to get through, right? But the way that we're going to talk about branding today, the whole point is you're going to show up more often than not to be even suggested for people like in my shoes to connect with based off of your profile and what we source for, or the people that we typically connect to, because your branding of what you do is so closely linked to what we do. You don't want to connect to every single person like me. You want to connect to the ones who are relevant to what you do. And there may be many, there may be few, but that's what the whole point of today is about. There's so many different approaches to staffing. This is just a way to get a little bit more above the noise. All you need is one good connection to get your job, one good connection to like make a sale, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think two other comments are backing you up in terms of this is possible that recruiters will go behind the scenes and find candidates proactively. And we can continue, please.
Sure. Okay. So this is as I've shown, right? Another thing to consider is what it looks like. Okay, perfect. I was hoping someone was gonna add me from this session while we're live, but if you look, right? I'm not putting you on the spot, Sebastian, but he has actually a pretty good headline. Like I know exactly, right, what he's all about based on his headline, right? This is something when it comes to headlines, we're going to talk about that. When you invite someone to connect, this is all they see. I have two connections now, but there are people, no joke, who have like hundreds of people connecting with them. And not everybody is just going to accept. Some people will be selective, right? All they see is a nice photo of you. Hopefully it's professional. And both of you guys, very professional photos. So fantastic work, right? And they're going to see this headline, right? And they're going to see like half of what you write here, right? At least I know this was from Hispanotech, but I don't really know 100% what the rest of this message is about. I may click on it. Not I will click on it. Don't worry, Sebastian. But the person who's receiving it may not click on it. They might click on it. They based off of what they see here, which is basically nothing, they're going to have to accept or ignore. So consider that when you're choosing a photo, when you're writing your name, when you're putting your headline, and if you decide to send a message with your connection, right? What is that going to look like? So I will happily accept both of you. Thank you very much for connecting with me. Anyone else who wants to, by all means, I would love to. Now, I just talked about before, you're suggested to connect with people on LinkedIn, right? Most people are going to check out, okay, who's it connecting me with? As you can see, like I went to Laurier. These people are all from Laurier. So it's based off of the school I went to, right? People you know from Lazarus Business School, Wilfrid Laurier, blah, blah, blah. It's showing me people. I get a little bit of a hint of their background, but as you can see, I can't, like, I know what building that is because I went to that school, but you may not be able to see what the background photo is, right? So if you are going to choose a background photo, which I recommend you do, you want it to make sense, right? On how it kind of amplifies who you are and what you do. Photos got to be professional. Your headlines got to be good. And again, if it's too long, right? Look at this, dedicated to securing insurance. I don't know. To get dedicated to securing what? I don't even know what that means, right? Not that that's bad. I'm just saying when it's cut off, right? Or it's not simple from what I can read, there may be maybe a less chance that you would connect. So consider what is seen when it's this little tiny box of a potential connection, right? People you know in similar roles, people you know based on your recent activity, right? So that's where if I'm connecting with a lot of people in a given skill set and your skill set is someone that I look for and your profile is branded well, you're going to show up here. I check this all the time to connect with people here, right? So it has a direct impact on your ability to populate in front of other people who may be able to bring you opportunity in whatever way it is. So keep that in mind, please. Are there any questions about that, what I just showed you?
No, but
No?
we have one that says, how can we detect if we are contacted by a scam recruiter? Could you give us some tips in this regard?
I mean, there's no like surefire way to know if someone's a scammer or not, but I mean, from what I can tell, no one puts a lot of effort into their online presence if they're a scammer. Now, I can't say nobody. Don't take that for advice. Watch someone get connected with someone who's like perfect LinkedIn and they happen to be a scam. I'm not saying that's not possible, but for the most part, the patterns that I've noticed in scammy LinkedIn messages is it's like a really generic, not very tailored. Like you could say AI tried to tailor it, but it didn't do a very good job of how tailored it was to me. It's like very, very generic message. When I click on their profile, there might be a name, some like basic headline, and basically nothing else, right? About what they do, where they're from. They're not connected to many people, which is also very strange. Like if they're in your space and there's no mutual connections, like why don't they have that, right? So, I mean, you can connect with me. You can always send me messages. Like that's probably the best way to detect it if you want. Like connect with me on LinkedIn, take a snapshot, send it to me. Hey, do you think this is a scam or not? I can look at it. I can give you my best advice. I can't promise anything, but I can promise to at least give you what I think based off of that. Usually it's pretty self-explanatory, in my opinion, I guess. Anything
Thanks
else?
for that. Thank you. And also, again, we have one comment backing you up. Recruiters tend to have completed profiles, good network, postings history. So yeah, it's
No,
exactly what you said.
yeah, not don't and again, don't expect every good like just because someone's like has a good filled out profile doesn't mean they're really good at staff or doesn't mean they're really good at their job, right? I know a lot of people who do the exact same job as me who barely ever log into LinkedIn and they're like amazing, trustworthy, fantastic people, right? But they still have like a good degree of things filled out. Like they'll have their where they went to school. They're gonna have like a good handful of connections. They're gonna have like an accurate depiction of where they work. Like the basic stuff they will have. They may not have like, a whole bunch of posts on this and that, but that's also fine. It doesn't mean that they're fake at all, and doesn't mean they're not good at their job either. It's just there's a clear difference between a profile that was thrown together in like 30 seconds to send a bunch of spam messages that's probably going to get removed when LinkedIn realizes that this is like a bot or something, and someone who just doesn't need LinkedIn to do business, right? And there's both. So by all means, connect with me, send me all of your spam messages, and I'll tell you what I think. So now, if it's okay for you, I'll go into an actual profile and how I filled it out. This isn't necessarily like a surefire way to fill out your profile. I'm not saying if you do this, you're going to get tons of sales, or if you do this, you're going to get tons of jobs. Okay. I'm just saying right now, my job has always been for the past 8 years to get people interested in me before I even call them, before I even send them a message, or before we even officially connect. When they see my profile, I want them to look at it and say, even if not right now, I think I maybe want to keep this guy in my network so that we open the door just a crack. If I get that, I'm cool with it. So far it's working. This is what I can give you. This is what I have to offer today. So the background for me is a little bit easier, right? This was given to me by my company, right? This headshot was professionally taken, but again, my company, like, they like this color. I have nothing against this color, but we have to do what they say. So they fixed this color for me, and they've given me this background photo that's perfectly formatted to LinkedIn's settings. You can go online and say, what are the dimensions of a LinkedIn banner? That's what this is called, this Curious Connecting People. You can get those dimensions. You can format a photo to it, and it'll work for you, right? You can input it. Same thing with your photo here to make sure that it's formatted. The last thing that you want, if nothing else, you want this to be clear. You don't want it to be like pixelated or like looking large. Like, you don't want anything that looks bad, and especially your face. Like, you want it to be very clear. So I would recommend spend a couple bucks and go get a professional photo done. I know there's a lot of good, like, cool AI, like, replica photos that a lot of people will spend some money on to get. Personally, everyone knows that it's not a real photo of you. You're not really fooling anyone. I'm not saying don't do it, but I would strongly recommend, like, just go to a professional photographer, someone who can touch up the photo just to do it professionally. It does go a long way. That's the first impression, right? Now, let's say you don't have a company yet, and you're like, oh, what am I going to have my background photo on? This is a friend of mine who, before he sells tickets for the Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers are a hockey team, for those of you who don't watch hockey. But when you look at his background, right, as soon as I log on, makes pretty good sense, like, what this guy's probably all about, right? Sells tickets for the Edmonton Oilers, right? The arena's back here. It speaks to exactly what he does. And not everyone's going to have the easiest connection between what they do and a photo. But if you don't have a company, just do some thinking on what would make sense, and try and make this just like, picture says 1,000 words, they say. Try and make this exemplify what you do day to day, right? It's a good way to start. You saw how it shows up on the little icon if we go into my network, right? And it starts suggesting you people. So really think about what that means if somebody were to effectively look at you, and that's the first thing that they see, right? You don't want something with a lot of, like, little details, especially when they look at it in the little small picture, because you're not going to see what that is. You want something that even from far away, you pretty much know what you're looking at, right? Okay, headline is also super, super important. I've experimented with this where I've had really long headlines that have, like, all of my interests in them. People used to like that. I've had really short headlines like this where it's very, very direct and basic. I've gotten good feedback on both, right? I think is an old colleague of mine who still has his uh, headline that way. Check this out, Greg. He's actually a good guy, really good recruiter. Um, this is his headline. All right, he's got his emojis in there, like, looks good. I'm sure it speaks to a lot of people, right? Again, just keep in mind the first thing that they see. Uh, it's going to be cut off if it's longer, right? But at least the key things he has there that you want to see, right? So it can work both ways if you want, like, a really nice long headline, or if you want something that's really short. For me, when I've tested both, my preference is strongly just to keep it very simple, exactly what I do, what I care about, and what I know my prospects care about. Whether this is a contractor, I do contract staffing, like I said, whether it's a contractor or someone who uses contract staff, when they look at this, contract staffing in US, Canada, and Latin America, that's going to fit into that little bucket if they view my profile really, really small in my network. And they're probably going to be interested, ideally, in connecting with me, right? If that's something that they're interested in. This little verification symbol is something that I would recommend doing. It's a bit of work to do. You gotta, like, take a photo of your ID and all that kind of good stuff. But as far as spam, right, what we talked about before, this is probably a really good way where if they have this check mark, they've clearly validated with their government ID that they are a legit person, right? It, like, scans your ID, looks at your profile, and then in 24 hours, you'll get this verification symbol. If they don't have that, you're just less legit than everyone else who does. Not saying you're fake, it's just, this is how LinkedIn works, right? We talked here about profile languages. So I only have English, right? I'm only business proficient in English, we'll say, as much as I try To learn other ones, that's pretty much all I got, right? You can add a language. And if you add a language, what happens is it gives you almost like another profile where you can rewrite literally everything that you see here in a different language. Not every single little post, like that would be absolute insanity, but like your about section, for example, your experience section, like all of this can be changed into the new language. So that if I have my setting to, I view LinkedIn in Spanish, right? I'm based in Spanish speaking country. I view LinkedIn in Spanish. Your Spanish profile will come up first and it'll give me the option to look at your English profile, right? And if you have that plus the languages with your proficiency level at the bottom, I mean, that's already something that will speak to someone who maybe their English isn't that good, but they need to find someone who's bilingual, right? Now they're more comfortable speaking to you than someone who maybe isn't proficient in their first language, right? That goes a long way. And especially with language requirements, because you can't just learn that tomorrow, that can literally rule you in and out of an opportunity. And that's where they start to make sacrifices on past experience, seniority. Like you can really lean on that for the right opportunity. With the about section, there's different ways you can do this too. You can write a whole massive story novel paragraph about who you are and what you do. I used to have that, and I used to get a lot of good responses about, wow, I read your about section, and it like really told me a lot about who you are, right? Lately, I've preferred something very simple, right? Over 8 years of sales, like you can read it yourself if you'd like, but it's very direct, very straightforward. And I think it does a pretty good job of explaining who I am in one sentence, right? Very concise. I prefer this. I'm not saying this is better than having a nice novel that explains who you are, what you do. To me, the best ones are either concise and direct like this, where it's very easy, not generic, concise, direct, and speaks well to what you do, or something that shows your personality. Not just like I've been working in this space for that long, here's all of my skills, here's my email kind of thing. You can do that, right? You'll get picked up on different searches, but I mean, it does bring out a little bit more personality and differentiates you a little bit more from most people if you can use that to tell a concise but impactful story, who you are, what you do, why you do it. That's your about. Okay. And definitely this stuff will get pulled up in the keyword section. If you remember down here, definitely something that will get pulled up in this section if I want to look for something specific. Okay. Services is something that you can, especially if you're a contractor, include. I believe it's a section up here, add profile section. Nope, not there. Right here, actually. Sorry, services. Yeah, they'll show you. And you can, based off of what you do, right? You can, especially as a contractor, like I said, you can add various services. It's a good way to get people, get suggested to people who are looking for that type of service. Not something that's like crazy used to find contractors yet, but I have a feeling it will be. So it might be a good idea just to have that ready to go. Can't hurt to have that. Eventually, if you do all of this well, and a lot of people connect with you and you want to start putting stuff out, with respect to video content or whatnot, or written content, our articles. This is a way to highlight your most interesting things, or the things that you find most interesting or that you want to draw people's attention to, right? Some of this stuff was posted by me like months back, but it'll still show up now. Like this one is a really old podcast, great one, really good. But I have it there because it was a good one, and I want people, when they go to my profile, to see this stuff right away and be drawn to it, perhaps click on it, engage with it, right? And here's some of the things that we have to say. This is also another way where if you have someone who's got a lot of this stuff, again, I'm not saying just because they don't have this, they're fake, but if they do have a lot of this stuff where you can see their face, they're talking, they're writing, as of right now, at least, this typically means that it's probably a legit person behind the profile and not some kind of bot, right? It's a way to show that exactly you're a real person, right? Showing your face, very transparent, real easy. Experience. Okay, so there's different things that people think is a good idea for this. For me, I have put my experience in my profile as if I was someone that I would want to hire. Now, I realize the fallacy in that is what if the hiring manager that I want to see my profile doesn't think like me? Well, consider that, right? If you have a good idea of what the hiring manager that you want to work with wants, you want to try and mirror that. For me, this is how I prefer it, right? If I would almost want someone who's, if I was looking for a job, right, I would want the person who's hiring me to have a pretty similar mindset and values on what they look at in a good candidate. And that's why I've written my profile this way, not just necessarily for that, but also, you know, for anyone who might be interested to this degree where they're going to really read through my profile. I'll explain to you now how I've written it. I start from like the very beginning. This is so I can be transparent. 30 years old now. I've been doing my in my current real profession for 8 years, right? Before that, it wasn't the first job that I had. As an 8-year-old kid, I had a paper route. I was carrying, like, I was a newspaper carrier, right? And you might think, well, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, why do you have that there? It was the first paying job that I had. And for me, when I'm looking for people who are applying to our company, I actually look at the first job that they had when they started working, right? And I'm much more drawn to people who started working well before they finished school, high school or university, as opposed to someone who got their first job right out of school. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If your first job out of school was after university or high school, not a problem. In our line of work, in what I look for, I tend I don't know why, but I tend to have a better result for people who started working from a very young age. It's just a pattern that I found, right? So if that's something that personally I look for, right, that's something that I also want to make sure that I mirror in my profile, right? Because like-minded people, that's part of what you want to draw to your profile, right? So I start right from the beginning. I mean, I don't talk much about it because believe me, nobody cares about the explanation of what happened there. But the fact of the matter is, it does show that, okay, this person has been working uh, for well before, you know, they finish their school. Probably shows a good indication of what their work ethic is like. Perhaps even makes a suggestion on what their family values are, right? As far as what work means, value of money, level of entitlement. It could suggest these things, and that's what you're trying to portray to someone who may be looking very deeply at your profile. Again, if there's someone who just doesn't care and they're skimming through profiles looking for keywords, I mean, hey, you already know how this works. You could easily just plug in all the keywords that you want that you might it might pull up on a given search, and you might get selected for an opportunity, right? This is more for people who are going to take the time to actually have a look and initially, before they even speak to you, be much more interested in you than if they hadn't seen this, right? You can't have that kind of initial connection based off of looking at a LinkedIn profile with everybody. You have to draw the line somewhere. And the best thing, in my opinion, is do what makes sense for you, right? Think about all the good qualities that you have, think about all the good things that you've done. And that's kind of what you're going to paint here. When I start actually filling out my experience section, is my first effectively like real job in the career that I'm in today. And what I do, I'm thinking of changing this a little bit, but in general, I try and use this as an opportunity to tell the story of my career, what went well, what didn't go well, successes, challenges, so that if you started, for example, from here, when I worked at Mosaic, and you read every description to the top, you'd have a pretty good idea of how I got there with respect to career progression, not just title to title, but how each experience complemented the next, right? In summary, this was an internship where I learned the basics of staffing, right? Here is where I went to an official staffing agency where I had a lot of challenges in my first year. And I failed at this, I failed at that, right? I was given the opportunity to help build something new where we did really well. And at that point, I was headhunted to go and work in Europe for the company that I work at today. It tells a little bit about how that story went through the pandemic, different changes in work style, into where I am today, where I'm leading a division, right? And if you read that, and you want to give me some feedback on it, whether you like it or you don't, I mean, I'd love to hear it. But this is how I prefer to tell this story. The main underlying reason, because someone is thoughtfully trying to find the right person for an opportunity, this gives a lot of context behind what you do. This gives a lot of context behind your story. So this is what I recommend. The photos, I also think add a lot of context. Not everybody has photos from work, and some photos from work, perhaps you don't even want to share. But for me, right, we go to a lot of events in my job. So even just being able to show being at some of those events, some of these like fundraising charity things that we do with work, right? Meeting some of the contractors, for example, that I work with in person. I mean, there are people who I would actively try and recruit who might know these two guys. When we talk about building trust and who's fake or who's a fake profile, who's not, I mean, you got 35 photos of you beside other people who are also in the space, you're probably real, right? So that breaks down some barriers initially too. This is also where with each individual company, you can select some skills that were relevant to what you did in that job. Now, this also goes here. Where did we have them? Skills. That's where this stuff will get pulled up, right? So based off of where you have the skill, it's always best to try and associate it to the job, and then it gets added to your profile. I'm gonna skip ahead to the rest of it before we like do full questions on this. So if you do have questions, by all means, please save them until the end of this specific segment, and we'll get to them. With education, like I said, some people look at it, some people don't, depending on the type of role that you're in. But I think it's always good to at least fill this out so people can understand a little bit of the context of what your education was like, right? In some fields, I would say even in my field as a salesperson, I think education is a little bit undervalued, but that's also because people don't always provide the context of what they really were able to take from that education, right? For me, I'm not going to explain everything that I did in my first 4 years of university, but if I went on an exchange and I was focused on international business and I took that to a point where I ended up working abroad, where I was headhunted to go work abroad, the story makes sense, right? And everything kind of led up to that. So if you can take in your schooling something very specific, right? For me, it was this exchange, right? For others, it may be something else. But if you can take something very, very specific and make that the highlight of your description in school, I think that's incredibly valuable. Making sure that your degree is there, the concentration, all that kind of good stuff. Again, some people don't care about that, but some people do, right? And every little bit that tells more of your story helps put together a big puzzle of why someone may be interested in connecting with you for an opportunity today or tomorrow, right? To make sure that's complete and make sure you select the actual company or the school itself. And it's not just, maybe I can actually show you if I were to change this. I don't even know if I can do that. Yeah, I think I can. So if I were to spell it wrong and I hit save, look what happens, right? It shows this. The brand's not there. It's not really something that people are going to immediately recognize with. It's spelled incorrectly, right? So you just want to be very careful about that. Make sure that you select the actual school as an example. And then it should pop up and there you go. You're there. Okay. You don't have to put high school. Another thing too, to be cautious about this is when you put the years in your schooling, university, it's a bit tougher because people go to university at any time, but typically we're all pretty much the same age when we're in high school, right? If you do put your high school, I'm not saying this is right that companies do this. If you put the year that you were at that high school, they can technically discriminate based on age. So if you look at graduation year, I'm pretty sure, like I don't know if there's a lot of high schools that are on LinkedIn, but some of them are. If you were to select that and the person were to say your graduation year is whatever time, or they want to squeeze it between this time and that time, again, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but could somebody discriminate based on age if you do input that information? Yeah, technically, right? So consider that depending on what information you really decide to put in here or not, okay? This section is something I'm really, really like I've been pushing a lot for quite a while is projects. A lot of people don't use this, and if they use it, a lot of them don't use it properly. This is an opportunity where if you tell the story of your experience, like I showed you above, where it's more of a story format to give context behind how you got to where you got to, A to Z, right? This is a way where you can get very specific because there's no way, like, think about this. I work at Montreal Associates now, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like how many of these projects, if you look at all the writing here, am I going to fit into my experience section? That's going to be like a novel if I try to include everything, right? So for me, this is a really good way to get a little bit granular, include links, for example, if maybe you built a website, for example, and you want to put the website URL into this project, I believe you can do that. So this is a really cool way to break down your work into projects. Even if you're a permanent employee, most people can break down their experience into various projects, right? You can connect. So if you look at other contributors, this is a way to show that, yeah, I am a real person. This isn't a fake profile, right? These are the people, real people on LinkedIn that I've collaborated on this project for. They don't get notified for this, so you can add as many people, take off as many people as you like, and they'll never know unless they actually look at your profile, but they won't get a notification. And this is a way where you can break down every single little thing, not every single little thing, but every, we'll say, bite-sized project that may be interesting for another company, right? I work in a staffing agency. Stuff like a target model, a target operating model revamp would be interesting for my boss's level at a different company, right? It's you may not understand what that means, but basically it's creating metrics for all of the salespeople who work at our company, right? Really hard to do, especially when there's international markets and stuff like that. It's something I was actively a part of at this company, right? So if someone else were to see that, they may be even looking for this in the job description, right? When they're looking at who's the best fit for whatever role they're recruiting for, it's a better chance that you're going to pop up as someone that they want to talk to, right? You can put all the types of description or media, for example, that you want. So this is a podcast that we do, right, at our company. So I can click on show project and it'll actually take me, if the link isn't broken, to our careers in the cloud on Spotify, right? So people can see exactly like what we're working on, right? Uh, Pretty cool, right? It's pretty updated. Everyone can see it. And we got some photos there too with myself and some of the guests. Just got to scroll back down. Sorry, the computer's taking a bit of time to load, but you get the point, right? This is a really good way. If it's a metrics driven company, it's a really good way to like show numbers in a very specific place. I know someone who's done this very well, and they had an interview recently, and the interviewer actually asked them, all the questions they asked were based off the projects they put in their LinkedIn. So this person arguably had a bit of an easier interview because they basically gave the interviewer everything that they possibly could want to ask. They wrote everything. So effectively they've practiced scribing this out in a way that's easy to understand. And their interview went a lot better than maybe it wouldn't have if they started with just saying, oh, tell me about yourself. And you got to go off on this tangent and figure out, what they're interested in hearing, how you can connect it. You only got 30 minutes. It's a lot, right? In this case, this person just went straight into the projects and they're like, okay, well, tell me about this project. Tell me about that project. Everything's within context. The conversation is a lot easier. And you've now had a fantastic interview, which you're probably a lot less nervous about talking about because you're comfortable with everything that's being spoken about. So that's projects. Highly recommend you take advantage of this. The last bit is actually really similar to experience. You don't have to put volunteer, but if you want, I mean, it's always something that you can do and take the same approach as you would with your experience. Just a little blurb. I think I have Hispanotech here. Yeah, see? There you go. All right. Just a little something to show what you've done, show where else you spend your time. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? It shows a little bit more about your interests too. I'll be honest, like if somebody ever applied to a job at my company and they also at some point interview or supported this organization, which is very close to me, I would be very interested to just perhaps give that person a chance, right? I know it's bias, right? It's has nothing to do with the job, but believe me, at a staffing agency and internal recruitment companies, I'm not saying that's what's going to get you an interview, but sometimes this little extra bit of something can get them to take a second look at you, and you want to influence them best you can, right? Anything can help with that. And I recommend you consider all the volunteering that you've done, throw it in there. We're back to skills and recommendations. So these are things that you can add or take away and associate to any of your experience. If I look at a job, okay, national sales manager, I don't know what this company is all about at all, but I have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for now about the job, responsibilities, requirements. I can use some of this copy and see where I can work it in to my experience, where it makes sense with integrity. Obviously, I'm not going to lie, but you can also look down here and say show qualification details. And I can see I have this skill, business development, great, but I don't have sales management or architectural hardware. While maintaining integrity, can I add these anywhere in my experience? And if so, where would they go? Would it be at when I worked at Tech Systems as an example? You can click on it. You can associate skills specifically to that role in as many places as you can, if it would ever load. Yeah. You can change these so that it better matches the job description, right? Now, if you do all of these things, there's I can't really show you this now because I don't have one ready to go. But basically, the person who posted this job is going to get a list of people who applied. And those people can get ranked based off of how well fit they are to the job. And it'll say this person meets 5 out of the 10 skills you listed in this job. And when they create that job, they're going to click all the different skills that they want. The more that match, the higher you're going to be in that ranking, the more likely you're going to get reached out to. So it's always good to have a look at this before you click, for example, easy apply. All right, fix it up, click easy apply, right? Try and apply if you're applying in buckets, like if you have a lot of opportunities that or you don't have a job right now and you're actively applying, try and bucket the same type of job with the similar skills as they are listed here together so that you don't have to change your LinkedIn so many times. If you're applying to so many different jobs with different skills, what I'm trying to say is that you're not going to match any of them necessarily too well. If you pick jobs that have similar skill sets and you tailor your skills on your profile to those jobs, you have a higher chance of being selected for interviews with those jobs. Once you get interviews, if you want to apply elsewhere, then you can do like another batch. That's a good way to make sure that your profile stays tailored to the jobs that you're openly applying to before you actually get an interview. But that I would say is pretty much the presentation to its entirety. Do you want to open the floor to some questions?
Yes, thank you. And we are almost at time. Would you mind staying up for a little
Yeah, I
more,
thought it
like
was
10 minutes?
7:15, right? 7:15,
Oh,
no?
yeah. Yeah, we normally book it to that, but I'm not sure if you were open.
No, yeah, I was planning for 7:15. We're good. Thank you.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you so much. And anyone who has to leave, as a reminder, we are recording this. If you have to leave, you can do so and you can check the recording later. We had a question regarding the summary and the about section. So
Sure.
you think, is it a good or bad idea that our LinkedIn about section is similar or the same as our summary in the resume?
Uh, well, I mean, it depends. Like if it's a one-liner, like you saw mine was a one-liner, I would probably use that in my profile section of my resume. If it's like a novel, then no, you don't really want to have that in a resume. That's made for LinkedIn, in
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
Yeah, always it's your opinion and we can take it. And we have
Hmm,
several opinions from all the speakers
great.
and it works for some. And this is regarding how you put your paperboy experience.
Yep.
Someone says here, I have 22 years experience and most career counselors tell me that it is not a good idea to have all my experience in my resume or
Yep.
profile because people will know I am not young and employer prefer you.
100%.
So what would
100%.
you, it's based on case by case, I guess, but it's just how far, yeah, do you
So
go?
I would look at it this way. Like there are sometimes I'll see like an executive LinkedIn profile where it looks like they graduated and went straight into an executive position for the past 30 years. This
Oh,
kind of also looks funny. And I understand maybe why they do it. Perhaps they doesn't really matter to them because they've been at the same company for so long, right? It doesn't really matter if you see the progression or not because they're probably going to retire at that company, right? So there is that where it's like a little bit misleading on what your story is, right? It all depends on what you're trying to convey. If you've had experience where you've experienced some ageism in application processes that you've seen, then yeah, at the end of the day, to get that first impression, right? Because before someone speaks to you, that most of the time they're doing some kind of judgment, right? Do I speak to this person or not? Do I dedicate 5-10 minutes to just quickly qualify them, even introduce myself, get an idea of who they are, or do I pass, right? If you feel that you've experienced that type of ageism as an example, then no, don't go that far back, right? If you haven't, right? Or perhaps because even for me, like it depends on what you're looking for. I may be looking for someone who has a ton of experience, right? Who's much more senior than me because I want someone who's been working, say, for example, 22 years, right? Sometimes people do look for that. It depends on what you're shooting for. If you think you're competing against a lot of people who um, for whatever reason, there could be some bias towards someone who's younger based off of what they're recruiting for, the type of position, the level of the position, then yeah, I would say putting all of your experience is going to be counterproductive. That's where I would say you want to cap it at where it's most relevant. So let's say I was in that position, for example, where I was being discriminated against because of my age. Let's say people thought I don't know, I wasn't young enough to be considered for this job, something ridiculous, right? I would probably cap my experience when I started in staffing specifically, and I would forget all of my part-time jobs before I started working, right? A lot of people will probably say not to do that. For me, I just prefer to tell my story this way, right? So it all really depends on what you're comfortable with. There's probably a ton of people who, when they're looking for because what mine could do, if you look at the controversy of how I've shown it, it could dilute, sorry, my overall experience. And they may say, oh, like he actually, with respect to his entire career, he hasn't really been working as a professional staffing agent for very long, right? I personally don't care what they're going to think, right? For me, it's more important that I want people to see where my story starts and where it ends, right? So I'm fine with that. But is it possible that people may look at it and say, oh, this guy's like kind of junior, you know? I can see exactly how old he is. He's only 30, he's too young. You know, we don't want to consider him for this job. Very possible, right? So it depends on what you're experiencing, what your level of comfort is for how much information you want to show, and the whole reason of why you're trying to show or market yourself in the way that you're trying to do it.
I am skipping a few questions just to stay on this topic of your history, work history. How
Yep.
positive those exposing our entire history on LinkedIn as migrants? This is the specific case because most recruiters and people helping migrants find jobs suggest that we start from scratch. So that they perceive all your history abroad as detrimental to your profile because you look overqualified for the entry level job. So I know this is a convoluted question, but in general, do you have a specific tip for migrants and how they tell their story from before arriving to Canada?
Yeah, I have a case example actually. So there's one woman that we work with in our network, right? Came from South America, worked for like 10 years in banking, right? So very senior, worked 10 years in banking in Latin America, came here, did a complete career switch, is in technology, right? And only has maybe like less than 4 years experience where in the field she's in today, right? If she didn't, so we got a requirement that had the type of experience in what she does today, but they wanted the person to really understand financial services, effectively come from like a financial background. If she didn't include her 10 years in Latin America, we wouldn't have called her. But we did call her and she did get an interview solely based off of that. So it's the same thing that I said before. Are people going to discriminate against you because you put it? Yes. Are people going to call you because you put it? Also probably yes. You can't please everybody with what you put on LinkedIn. But for me, I mean, like I said, we wouldn't have called her if she didn't have that experience because we wouldn't have known that she had that background, right? But we by the way, we did speak to this woman upon getting to Canada and having no job. So we did know her from back then. We met her at an event, right? She's really like great, like professional, good person, you know, we hit it off. Had nothing even remotely for her at that point, but we kept in touch, and 3 years later, we had an opportunity that was a good fit for her when she needed it, right? So that's another thing to think about too, is like the whole point of this is to get the right people interested in what you have to offer. And that group of people may be like 5. It may not be many, but all you need is one person to get you one opportunity. You don't need 100,000 people all caring about what you do. You're never gonna please that many people, right? But in her case, right, small group of people who know what she does, know what she's really good at, know how to tell her story. We got her that interview. If the job didn't fall through, this was like a client side problem, I guarantee you she would have got that contract for sure. She killed the interview, it was fantastic. So
Perfect. And I think that answers someone else's question regarding having experience in a different industry. I think you just answered the question is, do you recommend that I include that experience? It's 8 years in a different industry. So I think it builds up on your profile, and maybe just how to portray it, that it looks like related to what you're looking for now. So it's just, I wouldn't lay it out, of course, never. All your experience counts. We have one question regarding recruitment agencies. Do recruitment agencies typically conduct their own interview screening process before connecting candidates with the hiring companies? Or do they usually refer candidates directly to the company? Is this a two-step screening process, or how does this typically work?
For both, like some won't, but to me, that's like a terrible practice. If someone's willing to take your CV and send it right to the client, that's like I would not go that route personally, because we've aligned on nothing. Like we would never do that. I expect, like, if the only time we might do that is if we know the person already, like, really well. We've spoken to them like tons of times. They've done work for us before. Like, we know this person inside and out. We've met them. Like, we're good. All I need to do is quickly text them, say, I have an op that's like perfect for you. This is the rate, all that good stuff. Yeah, sure, I'm good to go. Like, we have an understanding, right? I would never do that with someone that I don't know really, 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 really well. So if it's a first call and they're like, hey, we want to speak to you first, it's a good opportunity for both people to get an understanding of like what's going on here. Is it a real opportunity, right? How long is it going to take to close? Like, there's tons of questions they're going to want to ask you, and there's honestly a ton of questions that you should be asking them too, so you have a good grasp on like what's actually going on. But anyone who's willing to just like send me your resume and I'll send it to the client, if you don't know them, that's a waste of time.
Okay. We have one. As a recruiter, do you think most of you read the recommendations on the LinkedIn profiles?
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
especially if like we'll read them for sure. But do they hold weight? It depends obviously on who's doing the recommendation. If it's clearly someone who is subordinate to you who's writing the recommendation, I mean, interesting if I'm looking for a manager, because I get some feedback on someone who reported to you, right? How good is this person as a manager? That's good. But for a real recommendation where we're looking for almost like a reference, right? For a superior, yeah, we want to see that. And that's something else too, that if you're looking at someone and trying to gauge, like, is this a real profile or not? Even for us, when we're looking at a candidate face value, like, is this a real profile or is this just some kind of bot? Recommendations are something that completely validates that, because it has to be given by someone else. So valuable, for sure, valuable.
Got it. We have one here. In terms of applying for jobs, is it more effective to reach out directly to a recruiter after applying? And how does that impact your perception of the candidate?
It depends on how they message it. Because like if the person is really a good fit and they reach out, amazing. If they're not, I try and take the time to respond to anyone who reaches out to me. I do the best that I can. Definitely not perfect, but I really do the best that I can. A lot of people, if I had to guess, I would say probably don't necessarily try and do that, unfortunately. So it depends on what you write. In my opinion, if you're going to do that, if you are going to reach the person directly, I mean, I like where you're thinking because you're being proactive. You're not just waiting for them to come back to you. I would say in general, yes, it's good to reach out, but it depends on your messaging. You don't want to like reach out necessarily and have like a massive paragraph of why you're good for the job, right? There is like we could do a whole other session on that, on like outreach and what works and what doesn't work, but you want to be very concise with that. You don't want to look like as much as you may need the job, you never want to give your first impression to someone like you need the job. You also don't want to be like, about it either. You don't want to be overly confident. We'll say there's like there's a way to do it where you can be concise and confident, right? And at the same time, not look like it's something that you need, but something that you're a good fit for and genuinely interested. But that's like a whole other session where we're going to have to go through different types of messages and calls and all that good stuff.
Got it.
Cover letters. I see one that just came through about cover letters. You want me to answer that?
Yeah, please do.
Some companies, yes. Other companies, no. Uh, some companies will make sure that you have to write it, and if you do actually put forward or if it is required, they'll pretty much always look at it and they will read it. But if they don't ask for a cover letter, it may not always be read.
Thank you. We have one that I skipped ahead earlier. Would you recommend publishing a portfolio of the reports one knows how to do? For example, if I have experience in financial analysis, I can put up a report without publishing sensitive information, of course. Would you recommend they do that?
Could be a good idea. I think anything that you can show tangibly illustrates what you do day to day is always good, as long as you're not breaking any rules with confidentiality, right? I think that's a fantastic way to show what you're best at.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think you touched on this earlier. Um, and maybe this is our final, well, we have one more from Maria, but yes, why recruiters ghost candidates? This is $1 million question, but anything helpful for getting feedback after you've been ghosted or something to that
Yeah,
effect?
there's probably a few reasons. Number one, a lot of the time they're scared to give the truth because they don't want to get in trouble for like discrimination or whatever. Because sometimes like they don't have a good answer as to why, right? And they are not properly taught on how to give proper feedback, right? That could be one thing. I'm not saying that's everybody, but that could be one thing. Another thing could be uh they hmm, if they're a volume based staffing agency or it's an internal recruitment, I think there's actually like a lot of policies companies have to just simply avoid uh, probably to avoid any sort of like subsequent action from a candidate where we don't give feedback. You either get it or you don't. A staffing agency, why they don't give feedback? Because it's pretty easy for us to make a call over the phone, even if we didn't want to put something in writing and give you exactly the reason why the client rejected you, right? A lot of the time, if it's like a volume-based company where they're trying to take a lot of CVs, God knows how many resumes they've taken and input and would have to give feedback to. So effectively, they've bitten off more than they can chew and are more focused on getting a CV in the door than necessarily providing like a tailored service to any given applicant who applies. Now, a lot of those companies make great money and they're very successful financially, right? Other companies may take a little bit more of a boutique approach where they don't submit like a whole bunch of resumes, maybe 1 to 3 max. Those are the ones where you're more likely to get feedback, right? So there's a few things where it could be company policy. It could be that they don't make time to do it simply. They either don't have time or don't make time. If 100 people applied, they rejected 100 people. You want to do a 10-minute feedback call with 100 candidates, right? They may just simply not have time to do that, right? To give it to every single person. So there's a lot of reasons. For me, the best way to get feedback is I can't speak for internal staffing or internal recruitment teams. But with a staffing agent, if you develop a really good relationship with someone who works at an agency, it's pretty easy, in my opinion, to get feedback because you have rapport already. They've prepped you on interviews. They probably told you where you're not so strong in an interview. And they're going to do a debriefing session with you after the interview to find out number one, like, is this a job you're still interested in? Number two, where maybe you could have done a little bit better. You can give some feedback. And then when you have that debrief, it's so easy to give someone direct feedback, right? And after you develop a relationship with someone, it's a lot easier to take that feedback too. So I guess that's where it comes in, right? If you have a good relationship with the person who's managing the process, you're more likely to get feedback. If you don't, and the relationship was transactional, the feedback you get is going to be transactional, likely.
Okay, we have the last question, and before I ask it, if everyone is comfortable with opening up your cameras, we take a group picture in every session. You will get a prompt to allow us to take your picture, so please accept it. And the last question is, Mauricio, what about the open to work feature? Does it affect your decision to reach a candidate at all, or is it important for you?
No, I mean, for me, no. Like for our team, like we don't really care if you're good for what we want, or like I said, if you've done work for us before, if you've been referred by someone we know, like I don't care whether you're working or not working. We're probably going to reach out and try and make something happen, right? If we have a good contract for you, we'll at least call you, take a chance. Doesn't really matter, right? I could definitely see how there are because there's there's a lot of companies that think, the best people are always people who are working, right? Because they're always gainfully employed. So there must be something good about what they do. There's a lot of factors why people may not have a job today, right? And I think it's becoming more and more apparent with the past couple of years. So I think that stigma is probably closer to on its way out, but I would always err on the side of caution and maybe don't immediately think that people are going to be so optimistic about things, right? I'm the type of person where I try to expect the worst. So very possible that there could be some bias against the green banner, right? You can still put open to work without the green banner and put casually looking. So it's a bit less like I need a job today. There's not really going to be a big difference, in my opinion. If someone's good for a job, whether you need a job today, whether you're closed, or whether you need a job right now, like we're still going to come to you and see if it makes sense for us to do business together or to hire you for something. So you're going to get people who say two different things. There's tons of posts that say, oh, leave the green banner. Who cares what people think? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. But at the same time, thinking worst case scenario, people could be very well biased. So you could also just hide it, still put open to work. You're still going to be put in the open to work bucket. And that's, in my opinion, the first place that a lot of recruiters are going to look if they're in a bind and have to find someone quick, right? So that you could still be in that first bucket if you select open to work, even without the green banner. So it's up to you on what you want to do. Just be aware that, there's bias all over the place, right? And you can not care about it and still get opportunity, or you can be aware of it, try and mitigate any sort of risk, and you can get opportunity that way too. So there's no right or wrong answer, to be frank. I wish there was.
We all wish it was easier and more straightforward, but thankfully we have tips from you and other people that are interested in helping migrants and immigrants and newcomers find the right job, the right level, the right salary, and challenging their skill set. And thank you for everyone that asked questions. Maurizio offered to still help you out if you connect with him on LinkedIn, and he will for sure keep supporting our community as he has been doing for a couple of years. And we appreciate everyone's time tonight, especially our speaker.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Gracias, Mauricio.
Gracias.